Imagine standing before a mountain of stone that seems to defy time itself. You tilt your head back, and the horizon disappears, swallowed by flawless geometry. 4,500 years old, yet its edges still cut the desert wind like a blade. How did they do it? How did human hands, without iron, without wheels, without even the concept of a pulley, create a structure so vast that modern engineers still debate how it was even possible? The Great Pyramid is not just old, it's impossible, and it's been taunting us for 5,000 years. But tonight, we're not chasing the myth of aliens or lost continents or secret machines. We're chasing something far stranger: how ordinary people, farmers, artisans, dreamers, created something eternal. The mystery of the pyramids isn't about what tools they lacked. It's about the moment humanity decided to reach for the divine. The air above the Nile hums with memory. Sand drifts against the base of a monument so ancient that history itself seems to kneel before it. You step closer, feeling the heat of the stone, the echo of 1,000 hammers long fallen silent. Somewhere between faith and architecture, the first spark of civilization was struck. These weren't gods, just people carving eternity out of desert rock. And what they left behind wasn't just a tomb, but a statement that humanity could defy death through creation. Before we venture further into the shadows, take a moment to subscribe, so you never miss a secret that history has tried to forget. The story begins not with the Great Pyramid, but with the low, flat tombs that came before it, mastabas. From a distance, they look humble, like giant sandbanks shaped by patient hands. Yet these were the seeds from which the Pyramid Age would grow. Imagine the early Nile Valley villages stitched along the riverbanks, their walls of mud brick softening under the sun. There were no monumental ambitions here, no dreams of reaching the stars. Death was intimate and domestic, wrapped in linen buried beneath the sand. And then quietly, something changed. Archaeologists call it the pre-dynastic period, a time when power began to concentrate along the river, when chiefs became kings, and kings began to think of eternity. You picture one of them standing on a dune watching the river glitter in the distance. He has wealth now and followers and a name that must endure beyond death. To preserve it, his people begin to build. First with mud brick, then with stone. These early mastabas at places like Saqqara and Abydos are simple rectangular chambers, but their purpose is profound: to create a house for the soul. They represent the first attempt to make memory permanent. What's astonishing is how quickly the idea evolved. Within a few generations, architecture became theology. The shape of the tomb began to echo the shape of the sun's descent, the sloping sides, the layered tiers. Beneath each mastaba, a labyrinth of chambers spread out like veins beneath the earth. Bodies were laid to rest with pottery tools and offerings of bread and beer. These weren't symbols of luxury, but provisions for a journey, an unending voyage into the western horizon. And every new ruler demanded something slightly grander, slightly more enduring, until the notion of permanence itself became the measure of divine right. One of the most haunting discoveries at Saqqara is a mastaba whose walls still bear the carved name of a man called Hesi-Ra, a royal scribe who lived around 2700 BCE. His tomb was lined with cedar panels, polished smooth and decorated with scenes of life servants bringing offerings, scribes counting grain, musicians playing flutes. It's as if he wanted the afterlife to continue exactly where his earthly duties left off. You can almost hear the scratching of the reed pen, the soft murmur of numbers spoken aloud. Hesi-Ra's mastaba isn't large, but it's elegant, deliberate, and startlingly human. It shows that even before the pyramids, Egyptians had already begun to think in stone. But here lies the first controversy. Did the idea of monumental burial arise purely from Egyptian innovation, or did it draw on older forgotten influences from the south, from Nubia, or even from Mesopotamia far to the east? Some scholars trace the earliest mastaba shapes to earlier mound-like tombs found along trade routes linking Africa and the Levant. Others insist that Egypt's genius was entirely homegrown, that its people shaped by the rhythm of the Nile and the precision of its floods, naturally thought in geometry and symmetry. The truth may lie somewhere between an alchemy of borrowed form and native faith. The mastaba marks the moment when impermanence became intolerable. Once the Nile's cycles had been enough, a flood, a harvest, a burial. But now humans wanted more. They wanted a structure that could outlast flood and famine, one that could endure even as kingdoms fell. The mastaba, with its clean lines and heavy walls, was both tomb and declaration. And every time the builders placed one brick atop another, they were rehearsing for something greater, testing the balance between earth and eternity. You can almost feel that shift, like the tightening of a bowstring. Somewhere in the desert, a new vision was forming. The mastabas grew taller, more ambitious, more complex, until one day a man named Imhotep would decide that the future should no longer lie flat against the sand. The next step would be upward. For now, though, we linger in this early silence, the half-light of Egypt before greatness. You can almost see the hands of a mason smoothing mud with a palm, the priest tracing symbols into wet plaster, whispering words meant to anchor a soul. These were not the pharaohs we imagine in gold and glory. These were the dreamers who gave birth to an idea that death could be defeated by architecture. And it's here in these quiet tombs beneath the dunes that the first lines of the pyramid's story were drawn not by rulers, but by the craftsmen who learned how to turn memory into monument. You walk north across the plateau of Saqqara, and the horizon begins to shift. At first it looks like another mastaba, squared and sun-bleached, half swallowed by dust. But as you draw closer, you realize its shape is wrong. It rises tier upon tier like a staircase to the heavens. This is Djoser's step pyramid, the first of its kind. 6 layers of limestone stacked upon one another, a vision of eternity carved into geometry. It is not just a tomb. It is the birth of architecture as ambition. The man behind it was Imhotep Djoser's vizier, priest, architect, physician, a man so extraordinary that later generations would worship him as a god. Imagine him standing there on the plateau, linen robes whipping in the desert wind, a reed pen tucked behind his ear. He looks at a mastaba and sees something else hidden inside it, potential. He sees height, the idea of ascent. The soul he believes should rise to the sky. So he builds upward. This was a revolution so subtle, it almost feels inevitable. Imhotep began with a traditional rectangular mastaba, but then added another layer on top, then another, and another. Each step symbolized a phase of creation, echoing the ancient belief that the world itself had risen from a primordial mound of chaos. The step pyramid became a cosmic diagram, half tomb, half theology. From a historical standpoint, it marks a seismic leap. For the first time, a pharaoh's tomb was not an imitation of his house, but a manifestation of his divinity. Djoser, through Imhotep's vision, claimed a direct bridge between heaven and earth. The limestone walls of his pyramid were polished smooth, reflecting sunlight like a beacon. Beneath it stretched a labyrinth of corridors and chambers over 3 miles of tunnels designed to protect the king's body and provisions for eternity. If the mastabas whispered of immortality, the step pyramid shouted it. And yet, for all its brilliance, the structure wasn't flawless. Archaeologists have found evidence of collapsed corridors, unstable chambers, and hasty repairs. The builders were experimenting, learning through failure. You can almost feel their hesitation, the way they must have tested each block, adjusting angles, refining joints. The pyramid wasn't born fully formed. It was wrestled into existence. Every miscalculation carved into its foundation is a record of human trial, not divine perfection. Here lies one of the great debates of Egyptology. Was Djoser's pyramid a stroke of singular genius or the culmination of decades of experimentation by forgotten architects before him? Some point to smaller step tombs in the surrounding necropolis, rough prototypes that suggest the idea had been brewing for generations. Others argue that only Imhotep's mind could have conceived a design so audacious. The evidence is maddeningly inconclusive. The desert, as always, keeps its secrets close. Still, the step pyramid stands as an undeniable turning point. In its shadow, architecture became a language of immortality. The smooth limestone casing that once covered its steps, now mostly lost, would have gleamed like frozen sunlight. The courtyards surrounding it were designed for ritual processions, places where priests could reenact the renewal of life. In this complex religion and geometry, fused into a single idea, permanence. There's something haunting about how human it all feels. You can imagine the workers camped nearby baking bread in clay ovens, their laughter drifting through the night air. Some of them would never see the structure completed. Others would live their whole lives building for a god they'd never meet. Yet in their hands, Imhotep's dream took shape. Block by block, they dragged eternity into existence. One small, easily overlooked detail adds to the mystery. The entire complex is surrounded by a 10-meter-high wall, pierced with 14 false doors. Only one entrance actually leads inside. To this day, no one is entirely sure why. Some scholars believe the false doors symbolized gateways to the afterlife portals, through which the king's soul could pass into the next world. Others think they represent the illusion of control, that only the initiated could find the true path to eternity. Either way, they remind you that this was more than architecture. It was performance theater faith made visible. And perhaps that's the most astonishing part. For all the technical brilliance, for all the mathematics hidden in its proportions, the step pyramid was not an act of science, it was an act of belief. Imhotep wasn't trying to solve a problem. He was trying to embody a promise, to make a god's dream stand upon the earth. As the sun sinks behind the desert, the pyramid glows amber, then fades to shadow. You can almost hear the rustle of linen, the whisper of prayers carried on the wind. In that silence, one truth lingers. This was where humanity learned to think in eternity. And in doing so, Imhotep opened a door that could never again be closed. The age of stone had begun. By the time Imhotep's pyramid stood complete, the desert had already begun to whisper of more ambitious dreams. The step pyramid was not an ending, it was a challenge. Future kings looked upon it and saw both perfection and possibility. You can almost picture the next generation of architects standing before its massive tiers, tracing the sunlight as it climbs the steps, wondering how to smooth them, how to turn this stairway to heaven into a single, flawless slope. Somewhere in that silence, the blueprint of the Great Pyramid began to form. Across the sands of Abydos and Giza, fragments of this transition still remain. They are not grand or polished, but half-finished, rough forgotten, the prototypes of eternity. At Abydos, archaeologists discovered a set of mysterious small-scale pyramidal structures buried beneath centuries of drifted sand. Their layers are uneven, their angles crude, almost as if someone had been practicing. These may have been models, early experiments in shape and stability, sketches in stone for a civilization learning to master geometry on a godlike scale. You walk through the remains of one such ruin, its limestone blocks shattered by time, its core open to the sky. The ground crunches beneath your feet, chips of failed ambition. Here, each fragment tells a story of error and discovery. Engineers had begun to test the limits of slope and weight, finding that too steep an angle caused collapse, too shallow made the structure heavy and graceless. From these failures emerged a deeper understanding that stone, if arranged with perfect balance, could lift the soul higher than any prayer. The first smooth-sided pyramid rose at Midam, commissioned by King Sneferu-Djoser's successor in vision, if not in blood. What remains today is a ruin-collapsed sides surrounding a solid core that still stands upright like a ghost of perfection. It is in many ways the most tragic monument in Egypt, a pyramid that tried to become divine and instead fell inward upon itself. For centuries, travelers called it the false pyramid, a cautionary tale carved in limestone. Yet Sneferu did not give up. He built again at Dashur, the bent pyramid, whose strange change in angle midway up its face tells a story of mid-construction crisis. At first, the slope was steep, imitating Midam's ideal. But when cracks began to appear, the builders altered the angle, softening the curve. The result is an architectural hybrid, half-bold experiment, half-cautious correction. Some say the builders panicked. Others believe Sneferu himself ordered the adjustment, turning failure into a lesson. Either way, the bent pyramid stands as the most visible proof of human trial and error etched into stone. But just beyond it rises another sleeker, prouder, more perfect. The Red Pyramid, Sneferu's third and final project, is the true bridge between the Step Pyramid and the Great Pyramid of Giza. Its sides are smooth, its geometry flawless, its chambers planned with precision. It is quite literally the first true pyramid. And within its vast stillness, you can sense triumph, an empire that had learned how to turn faith into engineering. It's strange to imagine how much experimentation, how many generations of architects, masons, and laborers it took to reach that balance. Centuries of trial, collapse, and recalculation, all leading toward one shape, one line, one perfect angle. By the time Sneferu's son Khufu took the throne, the blueprint was ready. The Great Pyramid was not the work of a single genius, but the culmination of every failed experiment before it. It was Egypt itself learning to build like the gods. Still, the details of that learning remain murky. In the ruins of quarry sites across Egypt, archaeologists have found carved notations, lines, symbols, and faint red grid marks on stone. Were they calculations, training exercises, notes left by foremen instructing workers on measurements? The markings suggest a developing science of proportion, an understanding that architecture could be planned, not just felt. Yet even with these clues, we lack the full picture. How exactly they translated concept to construction remains a question that gnaws at the edges of scholarship. And here lies one of the most fascinating controversies: were these early pyramids the product of centralized royal planning, or the result of competing regional workshops, each experimenting on their own? Some Egyptologists believe the royal architects coordinated vast networks of masons and engineers, each pyramid serving as a phase in a national project toward perfection. Others argue that Egypt's unity was less complete, that different nomes or provinces were racing to outshine one another in service to their gods. The desert, once again, provides no definitive answer. What is clear is that the Step Pyramid sparked something larger than architecture. It created a tradition of eternal competition. Every pharaoh who followed wanted his monument to rise higher, shine brighter, last longer. The pyramids became not only tombs, but signatures in stone, each one declaring, "I was here. I conquered time." As the sun fades over the plateau, you can almost see the ghostly outlines of these early structures stretching across the sand. The unfinished cores, the collapsed shells, the elegant survivors. Each one, in its own way, a sketch of ambition. They are the blueprints of human persistence, the visible record of a civilization teaching itself to make the impossible real. The Great Pyramid may be the masterpiece, but it was born from failure, from ruin, from trial. And perhaps that's the most human secret buried beneath the sand. Before they built eternity, the Egyptians learned how to fail beautifully. The Great Pyramid may carry Khufu's name, but its true legacy belongs to the thousands of hands that shaped it. For centuries, the popular image has been one of slaves in chains whipped beneath the desert sun. But the sand tells a different story, one of organization, skill, and pride. In the shadow of the pyramids, archaeologists have unearthed something extraordinary: the city of the builders. Rows of mud brick houses, bakeries, breweries, storage rooms, and even medical facilities, all part of a vast living organism dedicated to one purpose. You stand where the workers once slept, and it feels almost modern. Stone foundations line the earth like grids of an ancient blueprint. Each barrack could house a crew, and each crew was part of a larger system, rotating in shifts, eating, sleeping, laboring with clockwork precision. They called them files, work gangs, with names both proud and playful. One team even carved its nickname into the blocks it hauled, the drunkards of Menkaure. Another called itself the Friends of Khufu. You can almost imagine the laughter echoing through the camp after a long day's work, the pride of belonging to something far greater than oneself. This wasn't slavery. It was service, an act of devotion. The workers were fed beef, fish, and beer luxuries for their time. Their bones, when studied, showed signs of strain, but also of medical care. Broken limbs set cleanly, arthritis treated with balms. Someone looked after them. Someone valued their lives. This alone changes everything we thought we knew about the making of the pyramids. And yet their labor remains almost unfathomable. Imagine dragging limestone blocks weighing several tons across wooden sledges, the air filled with the rhythmic chant of overseers, the ground slicked with water to ease the friction. Teams moved in perfect sync, the sound of ropes, creaking sandals, scuffing voices rising in unison. It wasn't chaos, it was choreography. Every stone laid was a note in a symphony that took decades to play. Somewhere in the middle of this vast human machine stood the supervisors, scribes, and architects with reed pens and copper chisels marking stone after stone with red ochre. These marks, still visible today, read like signatures, names of teams, or placement instructions. They are the fingerprints of management, the earliest evidence of large-scale project organization in human history. You can almost picture one of them squinting against the sun, counting, shouting orders, making adjustments, then smiling as the next block fits perfectly into place. Of course, not everyone agrees on what motivated these workers. Some historians believe they were conscripted laborers, farmers who worked during the Nile's flood season when their fields lay underwater. Others argue that they were volunteers, men and women who saw pyramid building as a sacred duty, a ticket to spiritual favor or social status. The truth, as always, is layered. Perhaps they were both bound not by chains, but by belief. The workers' village reveals subtle details that hint at community life: small shrines built between homes, clay figurines of household gods, fragments of painted pottery bearing names of wives and children. It wasn't a prison, it was a town. A place of laughter, fatigue, and shared faith. And every path led to the rising monument beyond the hill. One overlooked discovery lies just beyond the workers' cemetery, a group of large, circular depressions in the ground. They're lined with stone and filled with animal bones, mostly cattle and sheep. Archaeologists now think these were feast pits, massive banquets held to reward the workers or to mark milestones in construction. The smell of roasted meat would have filled the camp music drifting under the stars. Even the gods, perhaps, were thought to join in. Yet for all its order, this system was fragile. A change in weather, a shift in leadership, a failure in supply could have brought it all crashing down. Some scholars wonder how such an operation remained stable for decades. Did Khufu's administrators possess a secret formula for logistics? Did they rotate crews to prevent rebellion? Did the promise of divine reward outweigh exhaustion? The answers are still buried somewhere beneath the sand. You think back to Djoser's time, the quiet beginnings of tombs, small workforces, scattered artisans, and realize how far Egypt had come. What started as a few hundred men shaping limestone had grown into an army of thousands, each one a cog in a civilization that believed building was worship. The pyramid was no longer just for the dead king, it was the pulse of the living nation. And perhaps that's what made it possible. Not fear, not slavery, but unity. A sense that to build for the pharaoh was to build for Egypt itself. Every hammer strike, every heaved rope, every grain of sand brushed from the stone was part of a national heartbeat. And even now, when you stand beneath the Great Pyramid's immense shadow, that rhythm seems to linger, steady, patient, eternal. The monument stands because they did. The forgotten workforce, the unsung engineers, the anonymous masons whose fingerprints still lie hidden between the stones, they were the true architects of immortality. Every monument has a voice, you just have to learn how to listen. For centuries, the Great Pyramid has been whispering its secrets through the very stone it's made of. Each block tells a story, where it came from, how it was cut, and the silent genius behind its placement. And the closer you look, the more impossible it seems. The outer casing stones, once smooth white Tura limestone, were cut so precisely that you couldn't fit a blade between them. Even modern engineers stare in disbelief at the seams, some less than 0.5 millimeter wide. No mortar, no cement, just geometry, gravity, and patience. It's as if the builders knew something we've forgotten. So how did they do it? The answer begins in the quarries of Giza and Aswan. Archaeologists have found unfinished obelisks and half-cut blocks frozen in time mid-extraction. There you can still see the marks, small circular pits along the edges where workers pounded the rock with dolerite balls, breaking off sections bit by bit. It was slow, brutal work. But it was precise. They didn't hack wildly. They listened to the stone following its grain, knowing that a wrong strike could split it entirely. Once the blocks were freed, the real challenge began transporting them across the desert. Some weighed over 70 tons. For decades, theories abounded, rollers, ramps, levers, but one ancient drawing changed everything. Found in the tomb of Jehuti-Hotep, it shows workers pulling a colossal statue on a sledge while a man stands at the front pouring water on the sand. It seemed minor until physics caught up. Experiments proved that damp sand halves the friction. The simple act of pouring water made the impossible possible. This single image rewrote our understanding of ancient engineering. Suddenly, everything fit: the sledges, the ramps, the sheer manpower. It wasn't mystical. It was mechanical genius, refined through generations of experimentation. But not all mysteries lie in movement. Some are carved into stillness. Inside the pyramid, deep within the king's chamber, lies one of the most enigmatic features of all the granite beams above the chamber's ceiling. Each weighs over 50 tons and was transported from Aswan, nearly 900 kilometers away. To place them required mathematical precision and architectural foresight, far beyond what we believed possible in 2500 BCE. The beams form a five-layered system designed to distribute weight evenly, essentially a primitive but flawless load-bearing mechanism. Modern engineers call it the first skyscraper skeleton. And then there's the layout itself. Every corridor, every shaft aligns with cosmic precision. The sides of the pyramid are oriented almost perfectly to true north, with an error margin of less than 1/15th of a degree. How could they achieve this without compasses, telescopes, or even a clear concept of magnetic north? The answer likely lies in the stars. The ancient Egyptians were meticulous observers of the sky. By tracking the rotation of circumpolar stars, the ones that never set, they could establish a fixed celestial reference. These imperishable stars, as they called them, were believed to guide the pharaoh's soul to eternity. The pyramid wasn't just a tomb, it was a cosmic machine calibrated to send a king into the heavens, and the stones prove it. When laser scanned, the pyramid structure reveals tiny shifts, micro-level adjustments that suggest real-time correction during construction. It's as if the builders measured, checked, and adjusted with a feedback system thousands of years before the concept of engineering tolerance even existed. One might say the stones themselves were the blueprints. Each level guided the next. Each layer locked the structure tighter, distributing stress naturally. No written plans have ever been found, but perhaps none were needed. The entire pyramid was its own map, a self-replicating design written in stone. But here's where the mystery deepens. Beneath the precision, archaeologists have found inconsistencies, misaligned chambers, unfinished shafts, and hidden voids detected by modern muon scans. These anomalies hint that even the Egyptians were experimenting, adapting, learning as they built. The Great Pyramid may not have been constructed by perfect divine architects, but by human trial and error guided by intuition and faith. In 2017, a French-Japanese research team discovered one of the most baffling findings, yet a massive hidden cavity above the Grand Gallery 30 meters long and untouched since antiquity. Its purpose unknown. Some believe it was a structural feature to relieve pressure. Others suspect it was symbolic, a hidden chamber meant to echo the celestial emptiness above. The pyramid, it seems, still guards its secrets even from those who built it. Every new scan, every new excavation peels back another layer of human brilliance. These were not slaves fumbling in the dark. They were engineers, mathematicians, and astronomers, scientists of their age, who built with purpose. Each stone was not just a building block, but a verse in a language of eternity. You can almost imagine the last block being set, the chants echoing, the workers cheering as the golden capstone caught the first light of dawn. The structure was alive, humming with energy, part temple, part tomb, part cosmic instrument. And then, silence. Thousands of years later, we still hear it, the quiet hum of genius carved into eternity. You stand in the Cairo Museum, surrounded by artifacts that look almost disappointing. A few copper chisels, some rounded dolerite pounders, wooden sledges, rope fragments, mallets worn smooth by time. These supposedly are the instruments that built the most precise stone structure on Earth. You look at them then, at the image of the Great Pyramid, and you can't help it. You laugh quietly. That's it. No secret drills, no laser-guided saws from forgotten worlds, just copper and stone. Yet here's the paradox. Every experiment, every test keeps leading back to these humble tools. Copper, though soft, can cut limestone. Dolerite, though crude, can shatter granite. And ropes woven from papyrus or palm fiber can hold incredible tension. The Egyptians didn't lack technology. They mastered simplicity. They understood their materials so intimately that they could push them far beyond what we'd consider their limits. Still, the question lingers: could such primitive instruments create joints as precise as machine cuts? Some researchers think not. Granite, for example, measures 6 to 7 on the Mohs scale of hardness, while copper is barely 3. Modern machinists say copper tools would have blunted almost instantly. So how did they carve those sarcophagi perfectly symmetrical, mirror-polished and hollowed, to a tolerance finer than a credit card? That question has sparked more arguments than any mummy's curse. In the 1990s, engineer Christopher Dunn proposed that the ancient Egyptians may have used some form of mechanical drilling, powered perhaps by manpower or water pressure. He pointed to spiral tool marks on granite cores that seemed to suggest rotary motion. Skeptics countered that these grooves were the result of hand-twisting drills using sand as an abrasive, not mechanical precision. Even today, the debate rages on: were the pyramids the pinnacle of human craft, or a mystery of lost science? Yet the evidence beneath the desert seems to whisper humility. At the ancient quarry of Aswan, researchers uncovered a half-finished obelisk still attached to bedrock. Its surfaces are covered in shallow pits, the same dolerite pounding marks seen elsewhere. And inside these pits, residue of crushed granite mixed with quartz dust suggests a process of abrasion, not drilling. Thousands of blows, thousands of corrections. The obelisk cracked before completion, a silent reminder that even the great builders failed sometimes. Still, you sense something deeper here, not lost technology, but lost patience. We build with machines, they built with time. Imagine hundreds of men working in rhythm-pounding stone day after day, guided not by blueprints, but by touch and sound. The ring of dolerite against granite told them everything they needed to know. In that sound metal against earth, they could feel the line between failure and perfection. And then there's the copper. Soft, yes, but copper chisels could be hardened by repeated hammering, a process that slightly compressed the metal, giving it temporary strength. And they didn't act alone. Sand, that ubiquitous Egyptian substance, was their secret weapon. Mixed with water and grit, it became a natural abrasive capable of grinding through granite over time. No lasers, just patience, pressure, and precision. But even these practical explanations can't fully dispel the awe. When you stand before a sarcophagus in the Serapeum, monolithic boxes carved from solid granite polished to a black mirror finish, you feel something uncanny. The edges are sharp as blades. The interiors are flawless. You can see your reflection in a work that predates Rome, predates Greece, predates logic itself. Some Egyptologists admit quietly that we still don't understand how the finishing polish was achieved. Maybe that's the point. Every civilization leaves mysteries that technology alone can't solve. We can replicate the methods, but not the mindset. The Egyptians didn't just build, they consecrated. Each stroke of the chisel was a prayer, each measurement a dialogue with the gods. To them, perfection wasn't aesthetic, it was spiritual. The pyramid was the pharaoh's ladder to eternity, and every flaw risked his soul. That belief fueled innovation. When copper failed, they adapted. When stone cracked, they learned. When measurements shifted, they recalibrated, not with computers, but with starlight and intuition. Even the so-called imperfections in the Great Pyramid structure, slightly uneven blocks, subtle shifts in angle, reveal human learning, not error. You can trace their evolution from one layer to the next, a story written in limestone. There's a quiet beauty in that. The Great Pyramid wasn't built by divine technology, it was built by divine patience. Generations of craftsmen who knew they'd never live to see the top, yet carved each block as if it were their name on eternity. Still, the whispers of something more never fully fade. Some argue that fragments of ancient knowledge were lost: mathematics, geometry, perhaps even acoustics. A few scholars have noticed that many Egyptian chambers resonate at specific frequencies, amplifying sound in strange, haunting ways. Coincidence, maybe. Or maybe they understood that sound like stone could shape reality. After all, the word for to build in ancient Egyptian also meant to speak. Creation was always a matter of vibration. So whether they used copper chisels, sonic precision, or something in between, the truth remains: they built what they believed. And that belief, sharpened by faith and endurance, left behind the only human-made object still standing from the 7 wonders of the ancient world. When you think about it, maybe the real lost tool isn't in the museum at all. Maybe it's something we misplaced along the way: our willingness to build slowly, faithfully, beautifully, without needing to understand every mystery we create. Night falls over Giza, and the desert exhales. The air cools, the dunes shift, and the ancient plateau, so solid, so immovable by day, seems to breathe. Beneath the surface lies another Egypt, invisible to the naked eye: tunnels, ramps, quarries, causeways, and chambers that have slept for millennia beneath layers of dust. You can't see them, but modern technology can. In the last few decades, radar scans, 3D imaging, and ground-penetrating sensors have begun peeling back the Earth's skin. What they've revealed isn't just a construction site. It's an entire landscape of hidden design. The first hints came from radar anomalies under the Great Pyramid itself. Deep beneath the Queen's Chamber, scientists detected a large void, perfectly rectangular, roughly the size of a commercial airliner. No one has entered it. There are no known corridors leading there. Some believe it was an abandoned chamber, a hidden cavity left to relieve pressure. Others whisper that it might be something older, perhaps a foundation from a structure that predates Khufu's pyramid altogether. Whatever it is, it reminds us that even the most studied monument on Earth still holds secrets it refuses to share. Beyond the pyramid complex, new mapping has traced ancient causeways, long stone-paved roads that once connected the quarry's worker villages and river docks. These weren't random paths. They were arteries. Along them moved an endless procession of sledges, oxen, and laborers, hauling tons of stone from the Nile to the plateau. In satellite imagery, these lines shimmer faintly like veins under the skin. It's strange to think of the pyramids not as isolated peaks, but as the hearts of a vast organism, a civilization built on logistics as much as belief. And at the edges of that network lie the quarries. At Giza, limestone was cut from the bedrock itself, the scars still visible along the plateau's southern rim. But other stones, granite from Aswan basalt, from Fayum copper from Sinai, traveled hundreds of kilometers by river. Near modern-day Wadi el-Jarf, archaeologists uncovered papyrus journals belonging to a man named Merer, an overseer in Khufu's reign. His logs describe delivering massive limestone blocks by boat docking at the harbor of the pyramid. His words bridge the impossible gap between myth and reality, proof that the pyramid wasn't built by magic but by astonishing organization. Yet for every discovery that clarifies, another deepens the mystery. In 2017, beneath the sands near the Sphinx, a team detected what might be a hollow chamber. Some claim it's a natural cavity. Others believe it could be an ancient archive sealed before the first pyramid rose. The Egyptian authorities have been cautious, allowing only limited exploration. Still, the idea lingers: perhaps the true story of the pyramid's birth lies not above the sand, but below it. Further south in Abydos radar, surveys have exposed buried mini-pyramids and long, narrow causeways leading to nowhere. They seem like prototypes, test runs for grander designs. In one of these unfinished structures, archaeologists found ramps carved directly into bedrock angled just enough to guide massive stones upward. Combined with the discovery of rope grooves and post holes, it suggests an intricate ramp and lever system that might explain the pyramid's vertical ascent. The desert, it turns out, keeps its instruction manual just very, very well hidden. You picture it now, the early morning bustle of a construction camp, the thud of mallets, the crunch of gravel, the shouts of foremen echoing through rising dust. Along a half-buried ramp, water is poured to slick the path, reducing friction. Teams heave in rhythm ropes, creaking voices chanting. Above them, supervisors mark progress with reed pens, noting which crews advanced furthest before the midday heat. Below their feet, the same ground you stand on now, ancient, compacted, holding echoes of their every step. And then there are the tunnels. Some lead to burial chambers. Others lead nowhere. A few drop into the rock beneath the plateau, curving into darkness too narrow for passage. Some speculate they were air shafts. Others think they were symbolic paths for the pharaoh's soul. But a handful of explorers, archaeologists, geologists, engineers suspect they were used during construction. Not to bury, but to build. Temporary routes for hauling a lining or stabilizing stone before being sealed forever. Each tunnel a fossilized trace of a process we can only guess at. The beauty of these buried systems is that they show evolution, not perfection. You can see ideas being tested, discarded, improved. An abandoned trench here, a realigned ramp there, proof that the pyramid wasn't built from divine blueprints, but from trial and error, iteration, and learning. In a way, the ground beneath the pyramids is like a palimpsest, a manuscript rewritten over centuries, each layer erasing and preserving what came before. And just as the ancients once read the stars to align their stones, we now read the earth to understand theirs. Our tools are satellites, drones, and magnetometers. Their tools were ropes and starlight. Yet both seek the same thing, truth buried beneath time. You recall the first time you saw the Great Pyramid from above, a massive geometry rising from golden emptiness. What you didn't see were the miles of tunnels beneath the unseen arteries that once carried the lifeblood of an empire. They're not just construction features. They're symbols of something far older humanity's need to dig beneath the surface of the world to find meaning. The sand will keep its silence, of course. It always does. But every new scan, every buried ramp, every fragment of papyrus reminds us that the Egyptians weren't just building for eternity, they were building through eternity. Layer by layer, secret by secret, until stone itself became memory. The pyramid is not merely a tomb. Step back and see it differently. It is a machine of belief, a cosmic engine designed to transform a king into a god. Every stone, every corridor, every hidden chamber is a note in a symphony that merges politics, religion, and astronomy. The Egyptians weren't building monuments for vanity, they were building bridges to eternity. The step pyramid hinted at it, Sneferu perfected the form, and Khufu's Great Pyramid synthesized the human and divine into one towering statement. At the heart of this transformation is solar worship. The pharaoh's ascent mirrored the sun's journey across the sky. The pyramid's slope, roughly 51 degrees, corresponds to the sun's rays at solstice, bathing the stone in divine light. The internal shafts, aligned with Orion and Sirius, served as celestial highways for the pharaoh's soul. Every act of construction was an act of devotion, and every block laid carried both material and spiritual weight. You can almost feel the sun warming the limestone, as if the desert itself is participating in a ritual that began millennia ago. Political power, too, fused seamlessly with religious intent. The pyramid declared, "This king is eternal, his authority divinely sanctioned." Surrounding temples, causeways, and subsidiary pyramids reinforced that message to the living. Priests performed rituals at dawn, chanting hymns that echoed across the plateau, while workers labored at night guided by starlight. The entire complex was a performance of immortality, one that extended beyond the individual to the collective identity of Egypt itself. And yet, for all its grandeur, the pyramid was intensely personal. Inside the king's chamber, where the pharaoh's sarcophagus once rested, the air is heavy with quiet. You can imagine the incense smoke curling in the dim shafts, the soft whisper of prayers, the careful placement of offerings. Here the divine and the human intersected. The king was a god to his people, but in his tomb, he was also a man seeking the comfort of eternal life. Archaeology hints at another layer, the symbolic significance of numbers. The pyramid's proportions encode mathematical relationships that mirror the solar year. Its base perimeter approximates the Earth's equatorial circumference. When scaled, its height mirrors the radius of a circle, whose circumference equals the perimeter. Whether intentional or coincidental, these correspondences reinforce the idea that the pyramid is a microcosm of the cosmos. In building it, the Egyptians attempted not only to preserve the king, but to preserve the order of the universe itself. Controversies remain, of course. Some scholars suggest the pyramid may have had acoustic properties, turning chambers into resonant spaces for ritual sounds. Others see hidden chambers yet to be explored that could shift our understanding of its purpose. The debate reminds us that even divine architecture is layered with human mystery. Yet perhaps the most profound truth is how the pyramid encapsulates human ambition and ingenuity. The step pyramid began as a bold experiment. The bent pyramid told of trial and error. The red pyramid proved mastery. The Great Pyramid became perfection, a synthesis of science, art, faith, and labor. It is a testament to what humans can achieve when they blend belief with knowledge, devotion with skill, imagination with persistence. Standing before it today, you feel its duality. It is at once eternal and intimate, celestial and earthly. A monument to gods, yes, but also to those who raised the stones, marked the angles, measured the stars. A pyramid is not only the king's voice, it is the whisper of thousands of unnamed craftsmen, their effort, their faith, their fleeting lives immortalized in stone. And so the dawn of divine architecture is not a story of a single genius, nor of a single pharaoh. It is a story of a civilization reaching upward of belief and engineering converging of mortals, learning to touch eternity with their hands, their tools, and their hearts. As the sun sets over the plateau of Giza, the pyramids cast long contemplative shadows. They are monuments not only to kings, but to the ambitions of an entire civilization. You can feel the echo of centuries, the human labor, the faith, the innovation that culminated in these silent, towering shapes. Standing here, it becomes clear the pyramids were never merely tombs. They were declarations, statements written in stone about the capability and vision of humankind itself. Every element you've explored, the step pyramid's audacious geometry, the experimental mini-pyramids of Abydos, the logistics of the hidden workforce, the precise engineering, the humble yet brilliant tools, and the buried channels beneath the sand, was part of a single continuum. Together they tell a story of trial and triumph, of repeated experiments honed over generations until perfection emerged. The Great Pyramid of Khufu was not an accident. It was the crystallization of centuries of learning, faith, and human perseverance. What does this reveal about the civilization that built it? Ancient Egypt was a society capable of remarkable coordination, creativity, and devotion. Their monuments fused spiritual belief with practical knowledge, blending cosmology, engineering, and social organization, into a seamless whole. They remind us that civilization is not simply a collection of individuals, but a network of shared purpose and vision carried forward by countless hands, each contributing a piece to the grand design. And perhaps the most striking legacy is the lesson in ambition tempered by patience. The Egyptians did not rush. They experimented, they failed, and they improved. The very errors of the bent pyramid and the Midim collapse became the lessons that made perfection possible. Human creativity was measured not by immediate results, but by the willingness to refine, adjust, and try again. As you walk away from the pyramids, the sand cool beneath your feet, you realize that their silence is not emptiness. It is a testament to resilience, to the capacity for collective effort, and to the human desire to reach beyond mortality. Every stone, every hidden chamber, every carefully aligned angle represents centuries of accumulated knowledge and aspiration whispering across time. The birth of the Egyptian pyramids was not a single event, but a process, a civilization learning, experimenting, and ultimately achieving something that transcended mere architecture. They teach us that even in the absence of modern tools, human vision, organization, and dedication can create wonders that defy explanation and endure far beyond the lives of those who built them. And as night falls, the pyramids stand not only as tombs, but as eternal symbols of humanity's drive to touch the divine, to understand the cosmos, and to leave a mark that endures long after individual lives have faded into dust. Their birth was the birth of a legacy, a civilization capable of dreaming in stone, thinking in eternity, and inspiring generations yet to come.